Good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday, 30th of September, 8 a.m. here in Melbourne, and welcome wherever you are in the world. I know we've got people dialing in from all over the place today. Fantastic to see in Melbourne. The numbers are dropping. Life seems to be moving to a degree of relative normality, or at least moving in the right direction. And of course, big news, certainly in my household, was that homeschooling seems to be coming to an end, at least for junior schools initially, and year 11, year 12. So I'm sure you're all really disappointed that homeschooling will hopefully soon be a thing of the past. And I'm joined this morning by Mark Bain. Good morning, Mark.
Morning, Dave. Thank you for the intro.
How are you today?
I'm well, thank you. And likewise, I'm also glad to hear that the kids are going back to school, because it's certainly been a journey, that's for sure.
Certainly has. So today we're going to be talking about customer-focused agile transformation. So welcome to Conversations with Thought Leaders. This is a platform we've created to connect community with inspirational leadership, great ideas and solutions from all over the world. I'm also the Managing Director of Granite Consulting. We're a recruitment and consulting business in technology and project-driven roles, work all over the world. So if you want a conversation around career trends, career opportunities, please get in touch. So in terms of Mark, so just a quick bio, but before we get into it. So Mark, for the last 30 years, has been working in technology, working in CIO, general manager technology roles. He also started, ran and exited his own successful business, which I believe was a BRW winner as a fast-starting business. So really well qualified in this space to talk to us about customer-focused agile transformation. Outside of work, he's a passionate president and patrol captain for Woolamai Beach Surf Lifesaving Club. So not only is he a great guy to have alongside you in a transformation, but you want him alongside you on the beach. So without further ado, we'll get into it. So Mark, how have you been coping in these unprecedented times?
Well, thanks, Dave. I think, like most people, it's getting to a point where I'm tired of seeing the same four walls, tired of being in the house. But professionally, if you're in an industry that deals with health and technology in a global pandemic, not necessarily a bad thing, and really have not much to complain. We're healthy, got an income, and doing a lot better than many, unfortunately, out there at the moment. So I certainly can't complain, but I think I was telling someone the other day that it's been the longest time in 40 years that I've not been in the surf. So I must admit I'm getting a little bit toey.
Yeah, I know that's been it's a big part of your life, so that must be, mentally quite a challenge.
Yeah, it's I'm an outdoors person, and like all of us, we're stuck at home. So I am missing that ability to disconnect. And for me, surfing is my way to relax and freshen the brain and have my time. And not being able to do that, I must have been the last 2 or 3 weeks. It's getting to the point where, I've had enough. I need to grab my board. I need my wetsuit. I need to duck dive a few waves and feel free again.
Yeah. Well, hopefully within the next couple of weeks, that will be reality for you. So I'll hand over to you for a presentation.
I'm just going to share my screen, and thank you to everyone for attending today. It's certainly very much appreciated that you've come along and want to hear our journey. I'm assuming the screen, everyone can see that. Just a quick heads up of what this is not. It is not a discussion on safe principles and frameworks and theory. Equally, it's not a great big discussion about the best approach to business strategy. It is simply an overview of the journey that we went through to transform to an agile way of working. And normally this presentation takes over an hour, so we're going to do it in about 20 minutes, so it will be a bit quicker than normal. And as I'm sure Dave will cover at the end, I'm more than welcome for people to contact me on LinkedIn if you want to learn more. So Dave did a nice intro, just adding a little personal note down on the bottom right. That's my eldest son. Everyone has They're moments in life that they'll remember, but when children are born, get married, etc. But certainly when my oldest son became a qualified lifesaver and joined me on patrol for the first time at Woolamai, definitely a life highlight. The agenda, the quick overview of the Fred IT Group, the tipping point, customer first focused strategy, structure and process. So really we spent a lot of time looking at ourselves in the mirror and trying to understand what we wanted to be and what we needed to do for our customers. Removing our silos, which is really the magic source of what we did. So we'll cover that in some detail. And then a very brief retrospective of what worked well, and I'll also include what did not work so well. And we've had a few of those, and I'll be very honest with that. Fred IT Group, we've got about 250 team members, been around for nearly 30 years, 50% owned by Telstra Health, and the other 50% is a mix of the Pharmacy Guild of Australia and the CEO, specialise in pharmacy and technology and health. So when health is a very big area, as we know, but we focus purely on drugs in the health sector. So that's the area that we focus on. So we'll spend a little bit of time on this because this helps set the scene for who Fred are and where we ended up in terms of our journey. So our customers are broadly split into two groups, pharmacy and then government. And on the pharmacy side, if you think about, you go down to your local pharmacy, as everyone knows, Chemist Warehouse, they're not customers of ours. They do their own IT. But we have customers ranging from small mum and dad corner store pharmacies right through to the big corporates, so that are publicly listed, and most people know Sigma, Ramsay, Priceline have very good market presence. So we have a very large range of customers, and there's about over 4,000 customers that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. In terms of products in the pharmacy side, if you think about a pharmacy itself, imagine walking in, it's effectively, especially these days, a retail store. And it's no different to any other store, except it dispenses drugs. And so you have point of sale, you have everything that you need for retail, back office, inventory management, both of the normal consumer products as well as the drugs themselves. And our software manages a pharmacy for our customers. On the other side of the line, we have the government customers, both state and federal. And not that too many people know, but for the last nearly 10 years, our database that has billions and billions of script images in it, pretty much I can find out, not that I would, of course, the history of almost any Australian citizen for their drug dispensing, and that's stored in the ERX Script Exchange. Probably no one actually knows us, but what we're behind the scenes best known for is SafeScript. The Victorian government a number of years ago launched the initiative to stop people dying from drugs of dependence, or certainly try to reduce it, because unfortunately more people die of drugs of dependence overdoses than on the Australian road toll every year. It's been an incredible, if you ever needed a story, we could spend an hour just on this one. Very quickly, we received a letter from a lady recently who was in a car accident a number of years ago, got addicted to a cocktail of drugs, made her depressed. And our software, she walked into a pharmacy one day, had specifically got herself dressed up, walked in, took her script in, the pharmacist was going to give her the drugs. The software actually alerted the pharmacist that this individual had been taking far too many of these drugs recently. He got the alert, he took the lady aside, got her some counselling and some help, because her plan was to walk down to the local park and drown herself in the lake. And so she has 2 young children and a husband, and fortunately this software saved her life. So it's actually a really nice thing to be able to say, and it's a great example of technology helping society, and that we're now rolling that out nationally and potentially even internationally. So certainly a great news story. And of course, e-scripts, COVID completely disrupted the pharmacy industry because now you don't need a piece of paper. So going back 2 years ago, these were the questions that we asked ourselves. We're at the tipping point. I've been at Fred for just over 5 years, and at this point, I was there for 2. And unfortunately, our answers to all these questions were negative. We were not doing well at all. We were really struggling. A lot of tension in the business, a lot of conflict, a lot of unhappy people. And we really were at the point where we reached a wall, and either we were going to try and get over the wall and grow and continue to do well, or we were going to fall backwards and potentially even disappear eventually or get swallowed up. So what did we do about it? We spent a lot of time, nearly 6 months, having a really honest review of ourselves, looking at our strategy. We used Playing to Win. We used that book, a fantastic 5 questions that you need to ask yourselves. They're incredibly basic questions. And again, I would spend more time on this normally. But to answer those 5 questions well is very, very difficult. And we spent a lot of time talking to our customers. We interviewed our customers. We got independent external advice. We got industry experts in. Our business advisors, Grant Thornton, spent a lot of time with us, asking us hard questions and constantly challenging us. If we thought we knew the answer, they'd come back to us and say, "Are you sure?" And a very open and a lot of tough conversations in a good way with the executive of the organisation, the board, and our customers. And we certainly learnt some things. And we produced a strategy document of about 30 pages, so it wasn't overly heavy. Certainly wasn't a 200-page document that sits on the shelf. We actively use that document and pull it out every couple of months to see how we're going. The other important note was it was structured and it was right sized. For a business of our size, we turn over about $50 to $55 million. It was appropriate for an organisation of our size. So I certainly recommend that book to anyone. It's a great read. And if you can answer those questions well as a business, then you're doing well. We looked at our structure, and I'll talk about this in a minute. And it was all about our customers. It wasn't about ourselves. And that's really a message that I'm hoping comes through in this presentation, is when we looked at our strategy, when we looked at our structure, our products, our processes, a total end-to-end review, every question was about our customer. What would our customer think? How will it improve our relationship with our customers? It wasn't about ourselves. It wasn't about internal politics. It was a little bit, but we tried to exclude that. And we wanted to be, when we restructured, clear accountability of who does what. From a process perspective, we had no process. I remember when I started there, you start at most organisations, you walk in week 1, you old school, you get a folder. Now you probably get a wiki. Here's how the way of working. Here's what you do. Here are your processes. Didn't happen, for better or worse, perhaps worse. So we had no defined way of working. So we selected the Scaled Agile framework to be our process for delivery of value to our customers to support the structure. We got expert advice. I think M. Campbell Pretty from Pretty Agile is on the call. Fantastic organisation to deal with, and we certainly listened to them. One of the mantras from the board was to be that we don't know better. We're in this position that we're in because we've made a mess. So let's listen to the experts and take the process off the shelf. We didn't want to turn it into our version of SAFE. Maybe that'll work for many organisations, but for us, we're very clear. We even redid or redesigned all of the position descriptions across the organisation, including the CEO. We've got good financial commitment from the board, so I was allocated a pot of money and managed that. And the support was top down. The board was on board and supportive and wanted to see the change. So this structure, this is what we were. Probably no surprises. I'm guessing many of you may work in an organisation that has or did or does look like this today. Sales and marketing, talking to the customers, handing over the what they think they heard from the customers and the feedback from the market into product management, who interpret what they heard, put their own lens on it, loosely define something and hand it over to build on the back of an envelope or a serviette, and then build, who was building all of our products, and unfortunately both internal products and customer-facing products for all of our different markets and products, and we had a lot of legacy, and just getting smashed, working very long hours, and everyone was trying to do their best, but the process and the structure was failing. Our operations group, which, as you can see from the list, covered quite a wide variety, just was 2/3 the size of the company. So something was fundamentally wrong. And at the end of it all, we have the CEO, finance and HR, and our CFO was losing his hair. So what do? We completely took the organisation that was that way, turned it on its head. So we created 3 Agile release trains, or value streams. I won't go into the safe terminology too much. And we took the individuals who were required to completely deliver the products and the value to the customers in those virtual trains or those virtual organisation units. So you'll notice a different colour people. They represent the different areas of the business, and we put them all on each train. So the visibility and clarity of who does what and who is responsible for ensuring the products that go to the customers are all in the one virtual organisational unit. And the level of conflict in the organisation radically decreased, at least 90%. The CEO and the board could see that there is a GM, in this case there's 2 GMs for what we call the KAISM, obviously continuous improvement, train. They're accountable ultimately for the success of the products to our customers. And we put all of the product people, the sales people, the support people, the developers, all on that virtual unit, because that meant that they all had to work together. Rather than, territories and business units, they came together. They're responsible, each and every person, for ensuring that they deliver the right product to the right customer at the right time. We split it across the pharmacy market and health. And what was interesting is we created very little train, perhaps a tram, I think Pretty Agile would call it, for corporate services, which cover CEO, finance, technology, legal, customer experience, and HR. And what we've seen, and it has taken a long time, at least a year, is that from a corporate services back-end perspective, we're actually getting more done, and it's more collaborative, and we're getting a better perspective of the whole business on that train, because the teams, you will have an HR person working with a tech person, working with a finance person in the same team, has been incredibly empowering for the people in those groups. They've learned the new Agile ways of working, and we're delivering a lot better services to the rest of the business, and in a leaner fashion than we were. And it's also empowered those people to learn about Agile, and they're accountable for making a difference. So that to our experience was the magic point, where we took the organisation that was this way and turned it on its head. A few photos. This was our what's called a program increment. So program increments run in traditionally 10-week cycles. A lot of planning that goes on. 6 weeks of effort to launch our first train, just from a PI perspective, which is a two-day event. Took 6 weeks of work. You can see there down the bottom left, our CEO was involved, of course. We had up on the top right, all of the GMs. We got in a dragon, Kaizen, the whole Japanese thing, Chinese thing, and we had 110 people in the room, and certainly very noisy, all split into their teams, talking and planning and generating the plans for the next 10-week cycle. And up in the top left there, you've got what's called the Fist of Five. So at the end of the 2 days, the teams themselves vote on the confidence that they have in delivering the plan and ultimately the fantastic event. Certainly, now we run them every 10 weeks, and it takes a couple of weeks to plan them. Now we've got much better at it. Retrospective, what worked well, and I could spend at least half an hour on this. A couple of key points. Certainly from the Agile's team, they understand the link between the work they do and our strategy and what it means for our customers. The customer is the centre of every conversation. We moved to feature-based teams. That certainly had pros and cons. Clear accountability. So if there's a customer rings the CEO or the board is hearing of a problem, it's clear who's accountable for what and where to go. We don't have the problem of old school, the ball's being passed over the wall and conflict and blame. It's still there to some degree, but significantly reduced. And the work is visible. SAFE makes work visible from the top when you're linking strategy to the portfolio level, right down to the individual pieces of user stories and tasks that the teams do. We separated technology for enterprise applications or shared services in the corporate world, not SAFE shared services, it's different, into my group. We came up with an enterprise roadmap for dealing with a lot of our legacy, old data centres, etc. And we separated corporate technology from product technology because before it was confused. Very focused on metrics and data now, a lot more to do in that space, but a lot less on opinions. If you go into a meeting and you want to put forward something, you've got to have the data and the facts to support that. It's not about the loudest voice, or sometimes happens still, like any organisation, but it's significantly reduced. We moved to value stream funding, so we don't do project cost funding. Our CFO is incredibly forward-thinking and supportive in moving to value stream funding. We could run an hour just on that. And it's been, now over 2 years, but the transformation went live in January, so we're still early days. And the SAFE framework was brilliant, absolutely fantastic, and certainly, as I said, pretty agile. We're very supportive. What didn't work so well? Portfolio management, quite frankly, was a disaster. Happy to report after 9 months of hard work, we're getting there. Lean portfolio management. I've been ex-portfolio manager, $100 million previously. Lean portfolio management principles are simply brilliant. It's so much closer to the work and more focused on the teams, but we really did struggle in that area. Our velocity is increasing, but probably not as well as we'd like for a variety of reasons, including technical debt. That is an anchor that is slowing us down terribly. We do have some role duplication. One thing we did find is not so good on incident management and the operational side of technology. So we're still finding our feet on that one. We have 2 business units on the Ks and trains, so they're 2 physical business units on 1 virtual unit. It does have some duplication there, but there's some reasons why it's like that, none of which I'll go into. Could be better. DevSecOps definitely is something that we've spent a lot of work on in the last 6 months. We've introduced a dedicated architecture team now in technology, and their focus is to introduce those principles, and that is a long journey that I think will take another 2 years, and as I said, technical debt. So that's, I'm just conscious of time. As I said, that's a 1-hour presentation done in about 25 minutes. So
just wanted to talk about the why, if we can, to start with, Mark. So can you talk a bit around what prompted Fred IT to explore SAFE as a delivery approach?
We had a number of customer projects that, quite frankly, were going very, very badly. Our financials were not good. The company had always been profitable. We were, our financials were not strong. and going the wrong way. And what metrics we did have were all pointing in the wrong direction, and no one was happy. So our customers weren't happy, shareholders were unhappy, individuals at the organisation were unhappy. And it really was those couple of key projects that we went, hang on, this is fundamentally wrong. And we'd also had some more new starters come in, and we were a little bit, including myself, shocked as to the way we were working, and knew something had to change.
Yeah, and clearly the pandemic has been a terrible thing for the world and humanity. But I remember a couple of weeks ago, it sort of resonated with me. I think one of your fellow executives said to you, well, because for a long time there wasn't so much flexible working in terms of remote working, and I think you mentioned that there was a tongue-in-cheek comment around where it took a global pandemic that Mark engineered. Obviously, you didn't. To cause us to change the way we work.
Yeah, it was an organisation that didn't support remote working, and I'm not disparaging the organisation, just a very honest comment. I've always been able to work from home or wherever I work, and it's about the outcome, not being chained to your desk 8:30 to 5. So culturally, that's where I'm from. And it's about that trust, which Agile and Safe, it's one of its key principles, is trust your employees. So presenteeism was a real issue. You don't need to be at your desk 8:30 to 5 and treated like a 2-year-old. We're all adults. You do the right thing, or most of us do. You deal with the exceptions. But certainly the global pandemic meant that the organisation, like all of us, had to change in 2 weeks. And we went from being at the office, or the offices around Australia, to being at home in 2 weeks. And after about 2 months, the leadership learnt that perhaps we weren't doing it right, and that some of those Agile principles and Safe, they really started to resonate with the executive. So more about the outcome, more about trust, empowerment of your people, rather than being locked to your desk.
And so, it begs the question, and I was reading an interview with the COO of Google, who was basically talking about relationships built. You're trading off that trust equity when you move from a face-to-face to a virtual environment, and unless you then come together at some point as a group of people, that that equity will diminish over time, i.e. it becomes less effective working virtually. I mean, that's what Google believe. Obviously it's the opposite of the mantra of a lot of big tech firms. But do you think, with the benefit of hindsight, this transformation would have been as effective if it happened, say, a year later? So it was kind of happening in the pandemic as opposed to started when we could actually all see each other in person?
The transformation, we got most of it done before COVID. What the big change for us around COVID from a safe operating model was the PI planning, that big event where 80, 90, 100 people come together from around the country into a room and work together to plan the work. And it is a highly collaborative environment. Our first one didn't go so well in this world that we're in, virtual, but we use tools like Teams. We're a Microsoft shop, so we use Teams. Lots of different tools such as Miro to help with the planning session. And what we're finding is that it's actually, while it takes a lot more effort to run that sort of event virtually than physically, and yes, it would be nice to do them together. I don't doubt that. We're finding that they're actually more effectively run because this medium that we're in is making us more efficient. It's also better environmentally as well. Yeah,
absolutely. Have you noticed, from a leadership point of view, differences from people who've met each other before? So they've had, what I would call, a traditional face-to-face relationship move into virtual, as opposed to new team members who've come into the organisation and they're working with colleagues. A lot of them they've never met.
Yeah, we did find, I seriously underestimated how hard it is to bring a new employee into an organisation in a virtual world. I had a new ISO start with our group, and I think it takes 3 times as long to bring someone into it, at least from personal experience, into our organisation in this world than it does back when we're all in the same building. It's much, much harder.
Yeah, I
You just
think there's,
don't establish those relationships.
yeah, I think, you've got the logistics piece, which is something that we take a lot of time doing as well. But then actually building those relationships, building the stakeholder relationships, anecdotal sort of lift straight, tea room type discussions. How do you actually plug that gap really? And I think there's a lot of work that's being done, and it's something we do a lot around, building those virtual relationships, how to, get that colleague type relationship going on. If we talk about customer, Mark, if we can move on to customer. So firstly, I guess a general observation, did you do a lot of work defining your customer? Because what I would think is that, and I do believe that technology is in some ways collapsing supply chains. Like, use the example, you love surfing. Years ago, you'd go to your local surf shop and buy a surfboard. Now, if you want a new surfboard, you look online, you're probably going to go direct. You might still buy it off the local person to support the local community, but chances are you've done your research, right? So in the same way, is your customer the pharmacies using your products and services, or is it, Mr. or Mrs. Jones going in to, get a new prescription or whatever it might be?
Very good question. Ultimately, it is Mr. and Mrs. Smith consumer that are the ultimate end consumer. And we did do some work on understanding that. And for our customers, in this case the pharmacy, to be successful, we need to enable technology to help them serve their customers quickly and efficiently, e.g. e-scripts. We did spend, of the 6 months on the strategy piece, probably 3 to 4 months was nothing else other than understanding our markets, where we thought it was going to head. We looked at international markets, the differences between Australia and other countries, in particular New Zealand and Canada, and went and interviewed them and wanted honest and hard constructive feedback from our customers. Before we started talking SAFE or restructures or ourselves, we wanted to really understand our customers. And even, I remember the CEO said at the time, he learnt some things about our markets and customers, and he's been in this industry nearly 40 years.
Wow.
So, when you get to that level of detail and granularity, and again, it was data-based, we did a lot of market analysis and had people helping us with that. When you get to that sort of feedback, clearly you really are getting to a point where you are closer to your customer. And we even had them in some of the workshops, even now some of our vendors. Even today, we have, particularly and I'm in corporate services as technology, we bring our vendors, our technology partners, into our PI planning events. And on the Kaizen train, we bring the customer in so they get to see and they're part of that journey.
Fantastic. And I think when you talk about your use of data and the customer, you have to think of Amazon, really, and they're so well known for putting the customer front and center of everything they do and then working back.
Yeah, it's we're not perfect, and we still have some areas of the business and our products that aren't doing as well as they should. But at least now we're getting to the point where we can approach the conversations in the right way. The problem's not about just who's got the biggest paycheck or the title or the biggest voice. We look to the data. We look to hear what the customer is saying. We've implemented tools like user voice so people can vote on the features and functions. And part of our product managers' KPIs now are to manage and report on our user voice feedback monthly.
Fantastic. I just want to briefly, and we're getting swamped with questions, so we're going to move into those shortly. This is really, it's going off the charts, which is great. Thank you. Keep them coming. But purpose from work through to strategy. And did you notice that by really articulating and creating more of a sense of purpose in why we do the work we do was helpful with engagement and driving ultimately better outcomes?
Today it has. We went through, and Pretty Agile warned us of this. And I guess it's like a lot of things that you do in life. You buy something new, it's shiny, it's flash, and then it starts to wear off and you go through a dip and then you come out the other side. We went through a period during the middle of PI2 to the end of PI3 where it was just hard. Yeah. People were going, what have we done? Why are we here? This is a disaster. Let's go back to the old way. And it took real commitment from the board, the CEO, the CFO, and myself to just keep driving. And we found today that people, because we've empowered them, they're closer to the work, they're closer to why we're doing the work and the link between the work that they do on a daily basis and ultimately the strategy. And that's where that Safe Script story, where I described the poor lady that came into the pharmacy, we shared that with the whole organisation. And people realise that from developer to BA to QA to whatever your role is in the organisation, that ultimately you're saving a life.
Yeah.
And that's the work that we do. And that's a really nice story. And people resonate to that. And it gives them a reason for doing their work and making sure that they try to do the best they can.
I know there's a lot of leaders on this show this morning, so it's really a case of sticking together as a leadership team, working collectively as a team, supporting each other, and really doubling down on what you need to do.
It definitely was, and that's the part that talks to the conflict. It was rough, it was rugged in the old structure that we had, and it's not perfect. Nothing is perfect. Not saying that. I'm not saying there's not the odd bit of conflict. Sometimes there needs to be. But with the clarity of the structure and the process and who's accountable for what, it reduces that. So by definition, we're talking about a customer problem. It's not about ourselves. We need to solve this together. And the executive is working better today than it certainly was even a year ago.
Fantastic. So I think we're going to move into some questions, Mark, just in the interest of time. So we'll work through them. So Gerzal Norzay asks, good morning, Gerzal, what are some of the challenges you've had to face to ensure increment plannings are done successfully?
In a COVID world, the virtual, as I said, our first couple didn't go as well as they should have. So it is a skill to plan for a successful PI event, and the more work that you do before, I guess like many things in life, making sure that your user stories and features and epics are well defined and socialised, and people understand what their role is in delivering that work before the PI event. And so when you walk in and they talk, the teams identify the individual tasks, it's known to them. And that is harder in a COVID virtual world and takes more effort. We did learn that more work up front before the PI planning event enables a much more successful PI event.
Fantastic. Sandra Willers says, Mark, how are you dealing with visibility? At a detail level, there's usually a lot of stories. What level does prioritisation within the business occur?
We start with, and I talked about earlier, the lean portfolio management, and I said it was we didn't do so well. What we've got now, we've got portfolio Kanban level. So every 2 weeks we run our lean portfolio management meetings, and it's not a status update meeting. We did slip into that after a couple of them, and Pretty Agile called us aside and said, hang on, that's old school. They're about identifying the work at the portfolio level that is currently in process, and then you've got your backlog, and then you've got your done.
Yep.
We start there at that level and then drill down. And the detail that we go to is feature level, and our teams, our trained leadership predominantly work in that space. So from epic down to feature, and the teams look after the tasks and stories themselves.
Fantastic. Dennis Teo wonders, do you use any KPIs to measure the progress and performance of using Safe Agile?
I was waiting for that question. Thank you. We threw KPIs out the window. Now, probably half or 2/3 of the people on this call just hung up. So we still have metrics, and yes, we have a few KPIs, but we, again, as part of pivoting the organisation, we moved to OKRs and objectives and key results. So top down, we've gone, what are our objectives to achieve the strategy, and what would that look like from a key result perspective in the eyes of the customer? not ourselves.
Yeah.
And that is another secret ingredient or part of the sauce that's making this work. Is the personally, I've never been a really big fan of KPIs, right or wrong. It's, again, just an opinion, my experience. I find the OKRs, and certainly if you're not across OKRs, Google it. There's a couple of great books on it. By making it about the results for the customer is far easier to articulate. It makes it real. And we do use the SAFE metrics, and I did talk about those down in the operations and the train just to see how we're going. But we don't use them to beat people up. We use them to identify where the problems are, where can we do better. And I don't generally go, or other GMs or other leaders go and try and solve them. We enable the process and the structure that allow the teams to solve it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think on OKRs, I'd really recommend the Masters of Scale podcast series hosted by Reid Hoffman, founder of LinkedIn. There's some really good stuff in there about OKRs and how pretty much most Silicon Valley companies use some form or another of OKRs. And it's also referenced quite heavily in the Eric Schmidt, who used to run Google, $1 Billion Coach, which is a really interesting book. So I think so. And I also think on KPIs, they've developed a bit of a negative connotation in society because typically it's associated with performance management. And so if you talk to someone about performance management, a lot of people historically said, well, what have I done wrong? And it doesn't actually need to be like that. But I think over time, it's morphed into something that it shouldn't really be that way. Completely
agree. And OKRs kind of soften that, 83% success rate type thing. And they empower groups of people to achieve the result, not specific individuals.
Yeah, and I think it's important as an organisation to know, where you want to get to and what you need to do there, and then how we're all accountable as a group to get there, as well as obviously individual responsibilities. So Gary Winkle says, "Hi, Mark. Great discussion. Thank you. Usually the corporate functions like procurement, recruitment, hold back truly agile practices." Easy, Gary. That's a bit harsh about recruitment. What successes have you had with your corporate services train?
I won't comment about HR there. That has been difficult. As I said, we've by including corporate services as a train. Now, maybe it doesn't need to be its own train. We did find that people felt left out in corporate services. And it was a bit old school, and they were still doing projects. As GM of technology, we were still doing projects. So we wanted to bring the people on the journey and become, and we're not there yet, and it probably, I could maybe have this session in 2 years and maybe we might be there or further progressed, is that by giving the people the opportunity to learn about SAFe, learn about Agile and work differently than the more routine way, we found they became more productive. The quality of work has definitely gone up in corporate services, and they're closer to the trains that deliver the products, and also starting to talk more about the end consumer and the customer rather than just corporate services. So I'm not sure if that answered the question, but that's probably the best I can do on the fly.
Fantastic. Jonathan Chalkman, I think we've got room for a few more questions, time for a few more questions. Says, "Hello, Mark. Thanks for a very informative session. What were your people issues in moving to a hybrid cross-functional model, and what advice can you give in overcoming such issues?"
Our biggest issue was that we had, and every organisation, has their issues, but ours was a particular challenge for our success with SAFe and our transformation was a number of people had been there a very long time, and either consciously or unconsciously were trying to derail the change and weren't. While I may say that they were supportive, perhaps their actions indicated that they weren't so. A number of them have left in a way that was done right. They weren't happy, didn't want to be part of it. Those conversations were done constructively, and we helped them find new jobs. So it was done in a positive way. And the CEO was very supportive of that. He didn't want this restructure to be about people losing their job, right or wrong. I think that's a great mindset. And the team saw that. So we had to, that was a problem, and certainly that journey through PI 2 and 3 that I spoke about earlier on, where we were struggling, that was difficult. Let's not underestimate how hard some of that was. The other part was just the sheer amount of change that we implemented in one go. Certainly, if Pretty Agile's advice was don't restructure at the same time you do safe. We had to do both because we were in so much trouble. And ultimately, I think it was the right call for us. For many organisations, maybe not. So dealing with that sheer amount of change and turning the organisation on its head overnight means that for 3 to 6 months, we were really confused as to who does what. What is this safe thing? What are the roles? What's a product owner versus a product manager? What's an agile team? What's my role in this new world? That was hard. And it comes back, you just got to have the grit and determination to be keeping your eye on the goal of where you want to get to. So they were our major problems.
Fantastic. That's a credit to you for being part of the leadership team making that happen. So Stephen Downing, an interesting question, this one. I'm warning you in advance.
Oh, no.
Great insight. So here's what we're all thinking. So what changes, if any, happened to the employee remuneration or bonus side of things with the move to value stream structure? Great question, Stephen. Thank you.
That is... I've got to be careful I don't divulge anything that I shouldn't. We didn't actually link money to this change. We're still paid the same we were paid before, a few inflation increases in the last 2 years. Like all organisations at the moment, yes, it was pretty good to be in pharmacy and technology at the start of this, not so good at the moment. So, yes, we haven't actually seen personal financial reward, but what we have seen has made us all happier, and we've learnt a new way to work, and we can see that the changes that we've done today will ultimately result in us being financially rewarded probably in a year from now.
Fantastic. We've got another question around change resistance from Darren Ringen. Any advice that you can share in terms of change resistance that you might come across?
Looking back, I think we probably should have sought some external support around change and helping a few people on the journey. We certainly followed the SAFE guidance on train everybody in SAFE. We completely changed our language, PDs, etc., to be safe. But I think perhaps some additional support, change managers would have been I'll put that as a label for the moment, would have been helpful. And if I was to do it again, I probably would have got 2 or 3 people to come into the organisation with different opinions and different ideas and different approaches, just to help soften some of the hard edges. I mean, that was a pretty blunt instrument. We, implemented changing the company overnight. I think we could have done a little bit better there.
I suppose it's marrying, the humanistic people change with the process change, and you need a blend of both things effectively. That's a far more eloquently way of saying it. I wish I'd said that, yes. Lee Cootie wonders about security. Obviously, there's a lot of cyber attacks happening, and increasingly, reported on. So did you do a lot of work around security aspects of your products when they're used in a retail environment? Oh, an excellent question, and very relevant given the industry that we're in. We have hired more security people. I have an ISO that works for me. We're going through ISO 27001 certification. We're going through IRAP certification, where we've introduced through the architecture team every epic and feature that is created must have non-functional requirements considered.
We've got a checklist now. Yes, probably the Agilists on the call have just fallen off their chairs by me saying a checklist. But every time that we create a new epic or create a new feature, if you haven't gone through the non-functionals, of which security is a key piece, then the work does not progress. And at the other end, definition of done does include meeting security requirements, and we're building into our CI and CD pipelines the automation around the requirements for ISO, so it becomes part of the system to deliver software and is less people dependent.
Fantastic. And we've got time for one more question, and we'll also, after send out Mark's LinkedIn details, so please feel free to continue the discussion directly. I know Mark's very generous with his time, although he's a busy man, but I'm sure he'd love to hear from you if you've got specific questions. But I do believe, the humanistic aspect is so important. So last question, Sumsum says, talking about people's mindset in adopting agile ways of working as opposed to a traditional environment, is there any advice you can speak to around this, and particularly in the virtual world, checking in on people and really how they're feeling about everything?
Everyone was unhappy, not everyone, sorry, a large proportion of the organisation was unhappy coming to work. We see the new organisations, that the Googles of the world, the Facebooks, the Seeks, the car sales, that work in an agile manner, the banks, ANZ. Industry is changing. Technology is forcing that change, and our ways of working have to change. We're at extraordinary risk as an organisation of being disrupted with e-scripts by a uni student or someone in their kitchen creating an e-scripts app and disrupting us overnight. So while COVID was an opportunity, it was also a threat. So our journey has brought and empowered those people that do the work to understand that. They wanted to be part of it. We trained them. We invested significant sums of money in training them and guiding them, and making sure that at any opportunity that we used, they could talk to our external consultants. We embedded some of the external consultants in the teams. They came to our PI events. They helped us on that journey. In terms of remote, in looking after people, we do everything that I'm sure most organisations do. Check-ins, the safe ceremonies are run virtually every day, and we've also done some team events, where we do things like online. I was going to say questionnaires, but it's not, quizzes. We do photo share days. My team, we've done show us around your house days. For those who are comfortable, some people aren't comfortable, so you certainly can't force them to do those things. So we've tried to share more of ourselves personally than I think perhaps we would do in a non-COVID world.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So we're out of time, and talking of checking in on people, this season we're a proud partner to Beyond Blue, obviously doing amazing support for Australia around mental health, never been more important. So we're doing it as a fundraiser, so clearly no obligation, but please do consider making a small donation to Beyond Blue. Details will be on our page. Also check out the Granite Consulting page for news on the new hiring process webinar, and I'd really appreciate it if you could all follow us on LinkedIn, Conversations with Thought Leaders. Mark, thank you very much. You've been really generous with your time. Tremendous insightful discussion with yourself as always. Ladies and gentlemen, Mark Bain.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everyone. Really appreciated you attending today.